You really think a little stone wall could matter? That's what Victoria Langford seemed to believe when she first showed up on my property that Tuesday morning, heels clicking against the driveway like she owned the air itself. I was knee-deep in calibrating drainage sensors along the stone barrier I'd spent months building. Mind you, not some whim, but a fully engineered flood protection system. 30 years as a civil engineer hadn't dulled my instincts about water flow. And this neighborhood sat in a natural bowl where runoff from the hills above would pile right at my inherited family home. 2 years back, a moderate storm had left water standing for over a week, enough to know the risk was real. I had quarried the fieldstone locally, reinforced it with steel rods, and made sure it stood 5 feet high and stretched 42 feet along the natural water channel. Drainage ports every 8 feet kept normal flow moving while rerouting potential surges safely. Every calculation mirrored what I'd done for municipal projects. This barrier could handle a 100-year flood. But Victoria HOA president, landscape architect, and self-appointed arbiter of beauty didn't see safety. She saw an eyesore. She arrived that morning in her pristine white blazer, leather portfolio in hand, her silver hair perfect, and eyes that judged my work like it was some crime scene. "Mr. Mercer," she said, skipping pleasantries, "I've received multiple complaints from residents about your unauthorized construction. Section 12.3 of our covenants requires HOA approval for structures affecting neighborhood aesthetics." She handed me a $10,000 fine with a 14-day removal order. The weight of that piece of paper was heavier than the stone itself, dismissing decades of engineering expertise in a single swipe. I tried to explain the hydrologized natural depression, the forested runoff, but she waved me off like a child. "We've never had flooding here," she said, voice crisp, eyes cold. "Your concrete wall insults property values." She left, her words lingering. Trust the HOA, not the man who actually knows water. 3 days later, a text from my old colleague Ethan at the National Weather Service warned of unusual storm activity. I began compiling a detailed technical package, topographical surveys, 20 years of rainfall data, hydraulic models, and El Niño forecasts. My presentation could have impressed city engineers. Victoria, of course, didn't debate science. She launched a social media war, twisting photos of my wall to make it look monstrous and rallying over 300 residents to demand its removal. At the emergency HOA meeting, 50 neighbors crowded the clubhouse. I stood, questioning her expertise. "Do you have a degree in hydraulic engineering? Can you calculate safe water flow for residential areas? Because I can tell you why our drains are built for 10-year floods, not the 100-year events we need to prepare for." She deflected, citing 12 years of local residency. But murmurs among residents hinted at hidden motives. Rumors of a wellness center and surveyors lurking near the HOA building. Reluctantly, I dismantled the barrier before the demolition deadline, documenting every step with photos and videos, sending the community a detailed warning about flood risks they'd ignore. 10 days later, Tropical Storm Jillian hit 6 hours ahead of predictions. Winds at 75 miles per hour, rain over 2 inches an hour. Our neighborhood's drainage, undersized by 40% due to Langford Construction's Shortcuts. Richard Langford, Victoria's husband, was overwhelmed. Floodwaters carved the landscape exactly where my barrier had once redirected it. Margaret Collins, a retired municipal accountant, contacted me during the storm, revealing financial documents exposing systematic fraud in HOA infrastructure projects and showing payments from Greenfield Development directly to Victoria. Worse, her daughter Emily held a senior role at Greenfield, poised to profit from a resort development that would destroy 60% of the forested hills above us, increasing flood risk by over 300%. Victoria's opposition to my barrier suddenly made perfect sense. During Jillian, she attempted to control information, cutting Wi-Fi and cellular towers, sending private security to my door, threatening me, for broadcasting real-time flood warnings. She was desperate, drenched, screaming about contracts and family obligations while I calmly pointed out that interfering with emergency communications during a declared disaster was a federal offense. By dawn, the devastation confirmed my models. Streets turned rivers, vehicles and fences swept away, and the HOA headquarters, built on filled wetlands, vanished under the surge in less than 20 minutes. Margaret and I pieced together damning evidence. Emails, bank records, voice messages, all proving Victoria had knowingly endangered the community for personal gain and development profit. We compiled a 20-minute documentary overlaying drone footage with my hydraulic predictions, showing the storm's destruction exactly where my barrier had once redirected water. Views skyrocketed. National engineers praised the precision, and media outlets reached out. We formed the Willowbrook Truth Coalition, gathering over 150 residents to organize legal, financial, and infrastructure oversight. Victoria tried a counter-PR campaign through Pinnacle Crisis Management, painting me as a vengeful ex-government employee, but we held the evidence. Time-stamped warnings, engineering calculations, financial misdeeds, and the voices of residents who had lost homes, heirlooms, and peace of mind. At an emergency meeting in the middle school gymnasium, I presented everything. Emails, flood models, financial records, and audio recordings directly implicating Victoria and her family's financial interests. Board members William Hayes and Patricia Whitman testified against her under reduced charges, confirming systematic intimidation and breach of fiduciary duty. Residents' testimonies elderly trapped in floods, families losing their sense of security sealed the narrative. Victoria had put profit over lives. The State Emergency Oversight Committee acted swiftly. Victoria Langford banned from all HOA leadership positions, charged with conspiracy, fraud, and reckless endangerment, ordered to pay $500,000 restitution. Langford Construction faced federal investigation. Greenfield Development's charter revoked, resort plans canceled, forest land conserved, and Jake Morrison entered witness protection after exposing multi-state environmental fraud networks. The personal closure came quietly when Victoria met me post-trial, stripped of authority and wealth, admitting she had let financial greed blind her to safety concerns. Margaret Collins became interim HOA chair, implementing the Willowbrook Accountability Charter. Full financial transparency, technical review committees, mandatory board training, and resident voting for expenditures over $10,000. I led the redesign of flood protection, integrating safety and aesthetics into Willowbrook Resilience Park, complete with walking trails, educational displays, and engineered retention areas. 1 year later, the park attracted over 50,000 visitors, generated tourism revenue, and provided permanent flood protection. Jake Morrison directed environmental compliance, preventing future disasters, while our case inspired state legislation mandating technical oversight and criminal penalties for boards prioritizing personal gain over resident safety. The park's dedication plaque reads, "Where science and community unite for safety, no one should remain silent when they recognize danger." Children play safely above historical flood levels. Families picnic beside flowing water features. Elderly residents walk accessible trails, and neighbors understand the power of vigilance. Standing there, watching the community thrive, I realized that justice doesn't always come from courts or fine-sit comes from knowledge, courage, and the willingness to stand alone when it matters most. Sometimes, nature delivers the lesson. Other times, it's us standing up to greed and corruption, proving that evidence and perseverance can triumph over intimidation and lies. And the message is clear. Never ignore a danger you can see, even if everyone else wants to pretend it isn't there. So, tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Comment below with your take on HOA overreach, community safety, and whether standing up for truth is worth the fight. You know, it's not always easy, but someone has to do it.